Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. I'm Jess or Jessie Curran.
And my name is Mark, and I go by Mark Your Pages. And my friends, we are here for a great episode today. This is a topic that has been on our list for quite some time. I don't know if I was necessarily ready to talk about it just yet, but like we're talking about it today. And we're talking about, can you outgrow your planner? Or are you outgrowing your planner? It's something that we take on for ourselves. We are thinking, yes, this is going to solve my life. And it does, maybe for a little bit of time. And then after a while, maybe it doesn't start to work so well. So we're going to talk about how to potentially diagnose that today and what to do about it to get you back on track and in the right direction.
Definitely. And I feel like this is kind of similar to a lot of topics in the sense you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this. I always come in a lot of these episodes being like, I haven't done enough research. Oh my gosh, it's a panic. So as we go through Planner Pals, make sure that you're dropping your thoughts, feels, comments, and all of the good stuff to us because we want to hear your input as well, especially on a topic that I feel like it really can affect us in so many ways and so kind of like I don't want to say constantly. It's like, am I constantly outgrowing my planner? But I kind of feel like in some ways I am. I kind of see outgrowing a planner as a constant problem that I don't necessarily need to be super, super consciously aware of at all times in my walking life, kind of a thing. But it does pop up frequently for me.
I remember the first time someone that I used to follow on Instagram basically was like, I've outgrown my planner. I'm not really using this anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and stop posting on this channel. And I was like, wait a second. What do you mean you outgrew your planner? Like, this is such an integral part of your life, or it was, but it made a lot of sense. I think they were in med school, so they used a bullet journal at the time to help like organize all of that things. I can only imagine the stress and organization that would need to happen with med school. And then they graduated and they were in the field and they just didn't need kind of that experience of that journal or whatever that was. And they felt like, well, because of that, I'm no longer going to post about it. And I'll be honest with you, I was kind of like bummed. I was like, but what are you doing next? Like, I feel like our journals and our planners and the systems we use grow with us. I've definitely known for myself too, what how it used to look. My goodness, almost 11 years. No, nine. How long have we been bullet journaling for? 9 years.
My 10-year anniversary is coming up in November. So you're on probably like 6 months less than that ish, roughly.
Okay, so yeah, so almost 10 years of this. I mean, it looks a lot different than it did, but I've always stuck with the bullet journal method. But I have found even recently, over the past year or two, that even myself have kind of started to move away from that a bit, but I have different reasons. And we'll share a lot of our own personal experiences in today's episodes as well. But this is it's going to be an interesting topic because when you start to feel like you're outgrowing it, I know something that I start to feel is like, well, am I failing at doing this? And I think it's important for us to just outright say it does not mean that you're failing at your system. It's really that it's just not working for you anymore.
Yeah, you're not failing your system is failing you, kind of a thing. It's like you kind of say that idea of, working for your planner, getting your planner to work for you, and vice versa and whatnot. But in terms of kind of, I guess, diagnosing this outgrowing or, being able to identify it for yourself, what kind of signs do you look for when you're trying to identify that, yeah, you have actually outgrown your planner or you're currently in the process of outgrowing your planner?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the biggest things is not using it. That's like the easiest one, right? And it's more than just not using it because you're in a rut, but the rut might be a symptom or a showing that something's not working for you right there. So I think that's probably the biggest one of something to identify for. I think also any type of extra frustration that might come along with it. You are using the system as it's intended. You're using the right pages. You're following the method that whoever created said method told you to do, but it's just not clicking anymore. I think that's a really big one. And in a lot of cases, if you've been doing this for a long time, you've poured so much of your time and energy into it. You want it to work. And kind of what we were saying earlier, when it doesn't, you feel like, well, wait, am I failing now? Like I'm not doing something right. But it could be way more than that. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that that's like nail, head, tonk kind of a thing. It's that increased frustration, especially with things that used to work well for you, or, you've done it for such a long time that it kind of just became a default as part of your planning system or routine. I'm thinking, for instance, if you had a particular style of tracker or tracking a particular type of information and you found that using it felt very, I don't know, stress free, very painless. Getting in and remembering to fill it in and such was just not even something you had to think about. It was kind of second nature. And then maybe you kind of get into this period where you actually do have to put in active thought to use that thing, or you're using it and finding it frustrating that you even have to come and check in with this thing, or maybe you're not using it at all, type of a thing. I find that as a physical symptom, one that's really good is just looking for the parts that didn't get completed, didn't get finished off, the emptiness or the blank holes in layouts that typically would have been quite full. That's a really good kind of like physical artifact to say, hey, maybe I'm outgrowing this system. Another one for me would just be like not reaching for it or defaulting to something else. For instance, if I'm finding that a particular layout in my everyday journal isn't working, am I just starting to use scrap pieces of paper? Have I started jotting things down on digital to do lists or notes or whatever? When I'm not instinctively reaching for the system that I had established for myself or the place that I was originally putting that information, and instead opting for something else, maybe because it's new and it's shiny or like whatever. We're not trying to diagnose the why here, it's just the what, really. I find that often for me, a really big symptom is just I'm putting things in other places as a default rather than the place that I intentionally set up to hold that information.
I'm doing that kind of right now a little bit. I found myself doing this the other day, but I think it's a bit of a symptom of working remote and always being home and always having literally all the information around me all the time. When I was not remote and I was going into the office, my bullet journal was the heart and soul of everything that was going on. I would write every single thing in there, every concert, every event, everything going on with work and home, everything went in there. And then over the years, I found myself really not utilizing that as much, but feeling like I had to. And then, like, just the other day, I was looking through our calendar for the next few weeks, and instinctively, I just started rattling it off to my phone. And I was like, hey, phone, on this date, this thing's happening. Can you add that to my calendar? Because I'm starting to use more of a digital calendar for kind of the day to day than I am my bullet journal. And I had a moment where I was just like, but Mark, that's not what you're supposed, this is not what you've been doing for the past several years, but it's just working better for me right now. I'm not forgetting things are coming up. I actually know that they're happening, but I'm not putting those things or writing them down in my bullet journal in advance. I'm not really using my future log as it's intended to be used, honestly, at all. I use something totally different. I have a calendar on the side of my wall that works really great for me right now, and I'm happy with that. But it was one of those things where it's like, whoa, like, am I outgrowing the bullet journal system? Maybe, but I don't know though. I don't know that I am. Maybe it's just parts of it that just really aren't working for me. So I'm just replacing it with something else, and it's okay. It's just I don't know, but at the same time, it feels weird.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think that, you've kind of almost identified a possible reason for yourself there. You used to be working in the office more, now you're doing more remote or whatnot. That's a really good reason why you may outgrow your system. And I feel like maybe it's just my head, but I feel like the term outgrow feel like it has this like negative connotation because I don't think it's a bad thing to outgrow a system, but I keep kind of as we're talking about it and saying it, I'm just like oh, that feels painful. And that's probably because like growing pains exist and probably like, there's the issues that come along with the actual kind of like physical growth of a person or whatnot. So I'm kind of like maybe identifying it in that way a little. But what's another way to word outgrow that doesn't sound so painful?
I think you could say plan and maturity. That's something that I've used in the past as well. This idea that, you're starting off very juvenile, figuring it out, following exactly the rules, right? And then you start to get older and life changes. We'll talk about maybe some possible life changes that could affect how you use your planner and if you use it anymore. But this idea that over time you just start to really understand your world, your life, how you like to work. If you look and like own individual human maturity, right? We start to establish that over time, and eventually you really do kind of create your own being, who you are, how you like to do things, right? And we like those rules. I mean, for me, the bullet journal method has been integral in me just understanding all the things that are happening and really my overall success just in life, especially around work and how I organize that. But it does change over time because things change in life, we change as individuals. So planner maturity might sound a little bit better than like outgrowing your planner because maybe you're still utilizing parts of it, but it's just increasing. Upgrade, I'm trying to think like video game terms as well, right? Like, you're powering up, planner power ups. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of me now in plan of maturity. I'm like, I'm a plan senior citizen or something, like walking around with my like journal Zimmer frame kind of a thing or whatever. But yeah, maybe it is just that idea of an increased understanding of the system and what works for you, but also in those periods of transition, things, fundamentally can change for you and your life and what you need and such. And that can mean that the system that you were working with isn't going to work as well anymore. And I don't necessarily know if I love calling it outgrowing my planner, but there's probably some kind of terminology that's kicking around in the back of my head somewhere. She knows some words. She doesn't know as many as other people, notably, but maybe one day she'll figure it out. I do think though the thinking about those kind of the reasons behind it, right? Because like you kind of mentioned with the remote work or like a job change or just like a life situation change or whatnot, these can have really big flow on effects for your planning system. Because if your planner is being used to organize your life and life changes, then of course you're going to need to make some changes there too.
Yeah, there's a lot I think that can go on with it. I mean, for myself personally, job changes have been a really big influence on how I use my journal. Some examples of that is when I started at the current job I've been at for 10 years now, right? I started bullet journaling actually when I got there because it was like a new world. I was just figuring things out. I gave bullet journal a try because it was necessary for what was happening like at that point in time in my life. And so that was like I was there as an individual contributor. So it was a lot of task and notes for myself. And then after a few years, I moved up into people management. And then suddenly my journal changed a bit. Not the method, the bullet journal method itself at its core still functioned that way. But the information that I was putting in there looked a lot different. It went from, a 1 page spread for myself for notes and tasks to multiple pages, multiple collection pages, an increased use in my index due to that, right? And so much was happening. And then like ebbs and flows of the job throughout time went from like, oh, an A5 journal is working great for me. I can get through an entire year in one A5 to later on being like, oh no, I used 4 A5s last year. Maybe I need to try a bigger size journal because I need to try to fit it all in there or whatever that looks like. So I think for me, that's probably been the biggest impact to me. How about you? Anything that's like jogged your planner outgrowness maturity for yourself that's like, oh, this was definitely a moment?
Yeah, I guess like adding levels of complexity usually means that something needs to change in the planner system. I'm kind of thinking about when I was at university, say, the type of planner system or planning system I used there was very much like Excel based for just like recording information that I would need, grade calculators, all of those kind of things, or a simple to do list in what, literally in Google Calendar, like the little to do section of Google Calendar. Do they even still have it? Probably, but that was sufficient because all I really needed to do was show up to work, which I didn't need to write down on a list, and then do my assignments, which I did need to write down on a list, kind of a thing. But then getting into teaching, and after the first year of teaching, just being so like scatterbrained mess Jess kind of a thing, because you have all of these classes and all of these appointments and meetings that you're doing and different things to do for all of these different people and all of these different hats that you're wearing, and also just like, life to live and all of the home stuff as well. I needed a system that was going to be a little bit more robust, but also allowed me to have kind of everything in one, but also have their own spaces. So I could either separate things by day of the week rather than just this long running to do list on a Google Calendar. Which, sure, you can schedule things in terms of like a calendar event, but that didn't really work so well. So going to bullet journaling or, Doc Grid notebook and putting my plans in there and making layouts for myself that was structured for the week in particular was really helpful. Also, as part of that, trying to organize a teacher calendar or whatnot, it meant that I could set up layouts that were specifically tailored to being able to see my schedule in there. Because each different school has their own system of doing their rostering for when classes are. They have different number of periods or like, whatever each day. They might have A and B weeks or whatever else. So it's a really nice system to be able to build it yourself, like a very DIY thing, which meant that the information that I needed to organize and store could be stored exactly how I would need it, which I very much liked, which a lot of digital tools at the time didn't really give you that flexibility. But then we also have, wanting to store all this information, but also wanting kind of an all in one, but also separate spaces or whatnot, led to an increase in the number of notebooks that I was keeping because I wanted to have a dedicated journal for just my everyday plans and a dedicated one for social media and a dedicated one for travel and like XYZ or whatnot. Which some of those weren't necessarily planners, but they were part of my journal ecosystem. Not that we were using that terminology at the time, and she still doesn't gel with it, but she's coming around to it. Okay, she's coming around to it. But then eventually I left teaching, right? So then those layouts that I'd spent so long developing to help me organize all of my teaching related stuff, like the term schedules and the weekly schedules and the calendars for report writing and doing all of my term topic plans and all of this kind of thing that I was summarizing in there. So I had all of the different parts of all of the different lessons all organized away and I knew where I was up to. I just didn't need that anymore. Which then you kind of almost go through this like mourning period because you can set the layout up as part of just like the habit of how you set things up. But if you're not going to use it, then the time, effort, and energy is just better spent somewhere else. Of course, then Notion came onto the scene. Ah, baby, I love Notion. And now Notion's an integral part of my planning system as well. I think that it's sometimes it's not even just the specifics of our own lives and what's going on for us, but it's also the tools that just like sneak up onto the scene. Like you're sitting there happy using your LT 1917, being like, ghosting's just part of my life. And then A&O rocks up like, it's Britney, bitch. And now you're like, cool, okay, I just throw out all of my LT 1917s and start a complete new obsession for 160 GSM. So yeah, that too.
Well, you when you mentioned Notion, it actually jogged some of my thought process is that technology has also been a major contributor to me utilizing my notebook less, especially over the past 2 years. Because it's something that I've really been noticing because I went to a bigger notebook with the intention of kind of containing more of the notes and the task and things like that. But even this week, I was just looking at my notebook and I was like, are you not writing anymore? Are you not putting things in this? Are we not using this? And I was like, no, 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 I am using it, but all of my project notes go into Microsoft Loop now for work, right? All of my tasks and to dos for my team go into Airtable. That's what I literally built this system for my team. Therefore, I also have to use it. I use my bullet journal for like real quick notes and tasks and things that do happen, but it's not what it used to be. And I was looking at it today and I was like, you're not using, why are you not writing notes? Notes are happening. And I'm like, Mark, because you're literally typing them in the meeting. I can have, my team's AI send me a synopsis of the entire meeting in bullet points now in seconds versus me having to like retype the handwritten notes that I took while I was doing that. Again, if it's something important, I need to remember it, do it, I do write it down. That's still integral, but I'm not taking the level of notes that I used to. And technology has been the main contributor there. It's kind of what I was talking about with my calendar before. Like it's easier now for me just to talk to my phone and tell it to add dates versus it was a pain in the ass. I have to get onto my phone and what was the date? Type in the thing, set the blah, blah. What was the time? Oh, it's reoccurring. I just talk to it now and it does it. So like that also has made it a lot easier and just, smoother for me too. So technology is great, but it is, also taking away from my analog planning.
Yeah, I think that also, if you think about, we're coming up on our 10 years of having our, physical planners that we've been using and the systems in there and whatnot. And back when we started, sure, the technology was technically there to add calendar events via your phone, via talking to it. But Schmery and Schmexer have gotten a lot better at actually being able to recognize what you're saying and interpret that nicely and put it in a place that makes sense. Like I can ask Schmexer what's on my shopping list, and then I can get notified of the things that I had on there 4 months ago. Like, oh yeah, I did want that. I never did go and get that book, kind of a thing. Ah, and see, in that case, there are some spaces that I just more reliably check, and Shishmexa currently is not linked up to those spaces.
I'm, there's things like Shmexa and Erie on my phone that, they know a lot about me. And I was just watching a TikTok the other day of some guy that was in his house and like asked it a question and it was giving him recommendations for like nursing books and things like that. And he was like, whoa, I've never asked you about anything around nursing. How do you know that? And was like asking it to do that. And I was like, because it listens to us. We know that it does. We put all of this in here. And there's a part of it that I'm like, oh, that makes it so much easier because you're feeding me exactly what I want. But then the other part is like, but maybe I don't want to give you that information. You know, it's like not that my notebook is absorbing it and doing whatever, though I have thought about like new technology like scanning in your pages and creating like a second brain from all of that too. But it gets into a funny spot like on what that looks like. But all of that aside, sorry for that little side room, but that's what it reminded me of though, is like there are really great parts of technology that help you remember things, but then also when you become too reliant on it, then like you almost like your brain stops working.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always kind of like on this, yeah, on the fence about it. It's like, oh, I don't want you to know too much because I don't want you to like, I don't know, prey on my weaknesses almost. You're probably out there, you're tracking my cycle. You know when I'm feeling like, most shoppy. You're gonna be like, oh, you're in your luteal phase. How about chocolate? She doesn't eat chocolate, but like whatever, those kind of things. Those targeted ads, you're gonna get you. And I used to always just turn on the, when you set anything up, they're like, oh, do you want like optional tracking, yada, yada. I'm like, sure, if it's going to make this app better for me. But then you kind of think about it nowadays with the fact that we have a lot better understanding of what privacy means in this, technological age or whatever. But as you said, that's neither here nor there. That's not about our planning system and outgrowing it, though it might be. Maybe Sherry and Shishmexa are the reason that you're outgrowing your planner. But in terms of the kind of, we've talked about the symptoms, we've talked about the signs that maybe you've outgrown it. In particular, those ones are just like not using things, that increased frustration. Another one for me is definitely the feeling of like time wasting or pointlessness. You get in to record something like, filling in a tracker or like, a log or like writing something down or whatever, and just being frustrated and feeling like this time would be better spent somewhere else. That's definitely a big symptom that hits me when it comes to maybe possibly outgrowing my system or my planner. But what would be like the number one, the number one symptom for you that you're like, okay, something needs to change?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I really think it's kind of what I said earlier, like just not using it, you know, just not using it. Like I said, right now is kind of that moment for me where I'm just like, well, what is this now? Because I'm not utilizing kind of a lot of the same stuff that I used to. I'm not, like things are living in different spots now. Like, do I still do this? Do I need to rethink a bit of it? How might I do that? Like how do we fix the problem when we start to identify it? I think that's kind of like the brain space that I'm in. I'm really glad that we're going to talk about this because I have some ways that like I've done this. It's funny. I'm one of those people that like I can give you advice all day long on like how to solve problems. Here's things I know, whatever, but I cannot like hold a mirror to myself and be like, Mark, here's how you'll solve your own problem. So I did write down some like techniques that like I've used for other things, which again, I need to turn the mirror around on myself and do for myself because it wouldn't cover so much. But I think that's just kind of like the brain space that I'm in right now is just like if I'm not really using it like I know that I used to. And that's the big thing. You're comparing, apples to apples. You used to use this system this way. It's been a bit of time and now you're still trying to hold on to it, but you know that you shouldn't. So for me, I think that's the biggest thing. What about for you?
Yeah, I think that it was the not using it for one and then just defaulting to other systems. I think that the nice part about being able to recognize that and recognizing it as a symptom of, okay, maybe I'm outgrowing my planner, maybe something needs to change. It's all good and well to notice the symptom, but I feel like sometimes people have a tendency to try and fix the symptom rather than the actual like root problem. So they're like, oh, I'm not getting in and using my planner. I just need to be more disciplined. I just need to try harder, kind of a thing. Or, oh, I'm not filling in my habit tracker. I need to like set an alarm on my phone to make sure that I actually come in and fill in my habit tracker or whatnot. Whereas it may not be an issue with the practice or the kind of routines around using the planner. It could actually just be something's wrong with your planner, kind of a thing. Or there's something wrong with that system that you've kind of, really kind of developed for yourself. You've used it quite a lot over the years or whatever else, but it's not working now. So I think that for me, when it comes to solving the issues in general, I'm always trying to kind of think about, well, what is the underlying actual real issue here? Is it the layout? Is it the amount of time it takes me and maybe I don't have that time anymore? Is it because it's just not fun and my little, dopamine starved brain just needs something that's a little more enjoyable or something like that? Because there are so many different reasons as to why something may not work, it's really beneficial to identify what reason is yours specifically before you try and start solving problems, because otherwise you may be solving problems that aren't actually your problem.
Yeah, I have kind of a two-prong approach to this. I have like the really easy one, and then I have the one that's going to take a little bit of extra work. The first one that I have used for myself multiple times throughout my bullet journal lifetime is just called review and renew. It's this idea that I'm going to go ahead and flip through and just review. I know I love alliteration. Review through your notebook. Like, let's take a look at the past 3 months or however long you've been using it. Help start in the very beginning, because that's honestly where you probably start to really track and see, oh, yeah, I wrote everything down for the first few months and then less and then less and then less. Right. And you can start to identify just through that. And then the renew part is like, okay, I've reviewed everything that's gone on. I've taken a look. I've understood. I've kind of, I've done a little bit of an analysis here based off of like what I'm seeing. Okay, I have this renewed sense of enjoyment or kind of new direction on it. That's the easiest version. The other is my favorite thing to do is a root cause analysis. This is like the thing I've done so often. Now, usually I use this for work. So if there's like a business problem you're trying to solve, a communication problem, I've only ever used this analysis, honestly, at work. But I was thinking about it today and I was like, no, we have to identify the root cause of this issue. And so the easiest thing I've ever done is just the 5 whys. And this is like something you can actually do in your notebook that you're not using or that you're outgrowing or you might be maturing out of, is you ask yourself the question, which I think for all of us might be, why am I currently not using my notebook the way that I used to? Right. And then you answer yourself and then you say, okay, why? Right. And you follow that down until you get to the 5 whys. So your first question, and then you ask yourself 4 more times why every time you answer that. And the idea there is that you will eventually get down to the actual root cause. And a lot of the times it does, at least in work, it does kind of fall into that communication, personnel issue, things like that. It's always a little bit harder when you're like 5 whying yourself because you're like, I am the person, I am the communicator. Like, I might be the problem, and that's a little hard to swallow.
Definitely. Because what? Okay, so your problem is that you're not using your planner the way that you used to be. Why, Mark? Why aren't you using it?
Well, for me, it's because right now I'm utilizing technology for work a lot more, and all of my meeting notes and tasks go into digital tools.
Why?
Why? Well, that's because what we've decided as a team we're going to do, and everybody has adopted that as the way of working and making that happen.
Yeah, I'm not gonna keep going with this.
But you can see though, like even just that far along. I mean, I already kind of knew my problem because I stated it earlier, but that's just a really great example. Do it with a friend. I mean, even us going back and forth like that was helpful because it's one thing when you're asking yourself the question. It's different when someone else is asking because it almost feels like an interview, but it does make you think a little bit more. And like for myself, essentially going through that activity, even just the 3 whys that we did is because it's a system we set up at work. It's currently working and helping us be more collaborative. We're filling each other in and it's easy to do. And that's why. So then now for me, I'm like, okay, but what's the solution to that when it comes to my planner? It might be kind of what I'm doing now a bit more is kind of utilizing it for myself personally from a standpoint of like the notes and tasks and things that I need to remember for myself, not as a team, because I don't want to create duplication for myself. That would be further on why I'm not using my planner in there because I don't want to have to write it down and put it into this digital system and have to try to keep both of those updated at the same time. That's a pain in the ass and a waste of my time. Kind of what you were talking about earlier. Like that's a main point.
Yeah, I think what five wising myself for a past problem, one that I used to have, is that I got into this system where I would use monthly habit trackers and they were set up in a vertical style. So you had little icons for each of the habits, you have a row for each of the days of the month, and I just go and color in a box, and it worked so beautifully until it didn't, until there was a point where it just stopped working. So it's like, okay, well, what's the problem? I'm not using my habit tracker. Why? It's too much of a faff to fill in. Okay, well, like, why is it too much of a faff to fill in? Oh, because I have to flip back to a separate page to go fill it in. It's like, well, okay, well, why is that a problem? I spend most of my time on my weekly log because that's where all of my information for the week is. And then I guess you guys ask your question, well, like, well, why can't you just have it there? So instead of using a monthly log or like a monthly kind of habit tracker system, I just moved it onto the weekly system, and that worked so much better because it's right there, right in front of my face. Like the main issue that I had there, if we're getting specific about the problem, is that my habit tracker was just so easy to ignore because it wasn't on a layout that I actively would use. It would be something that I had to consciously think to go and flip back to, as opposed to being right there in front of my face where I spent the majority of my time in my planner, which is with those daily task lists that I had on my weekly log. In trying to solve that issue, that's one version of solving for the habit tracker. But maybe the issue isn't flipping back to it. Maybe you do flip back to it, and that's totally fine. Maybe there are other, trackers that you have there that you are actively filling in, but the habit tracker itself isn't getting filled in. So it's like, okay, well, why specifically is this one not working, but that one is? I really love doing comparisons in terms of, thinking about this doesn't work. I'm not using this. I'm finding this to be like sucky, but this other thing is going really well. I do consistently use it. It's enjoyable to use. It's easy. So how can I kind of use what I know about making this thing work and apply it to the thing that isn't working? So we're thinking about another issue that I might have had with a habit tracker. I say might have. She definitely had this with a habit tracker. It was the fact that I was using paint to fill it in. It looked gorgeous when it was done, but the idea of whipping out my paints at the end of the day to fill in a section of a box just to say what my mood was for the day, I'm like, no, I don't got time for that. I'm a busy lady. I gotta go to bed. Actually, she probably wasn't going to bed. She was probably scrolling Instagram. It doesn't matter. Because I had put like the barrier to entry in filling in the tracker as being like a mountain in my head, because I'm not really a painter on the best of days. So getting, me at the end of a day where I want to fill in a little box to say my mood was shit. Like, she's not going to whip out her paints and do that. So I almost had to then go and pencil in what my mood was so that then at the end of the week I could go and backfill it. Or I'm pretty sure I just ended up backfilling it at the end of the month because I'm like, oh, Instagram wants me to post a picture. Okay, Instagram doesn't want it. The algorithm must be fed or whatever. So it's like, I need to fill in a picture, or like, fill in this tracker so I can take a picture so I can post it to Instagram. So all the data's probably a lie. And that's the thing, right? If I start filling in my habit tracker just for the sake of having my habit tracker filled in, then the habit tracker is not working. It is pointless. Move on and try something else.
Yeah, I was gonna say a really big thing. I think if you five wide, a lot of that for myself with trackers was all performative data. It was, oh, I created this so that I could post about this on Instagram. I mean, even for myself, I don't do them anymore because I kind of just fell out of love with them as I used to have an Instagram follower tracker, especially early on when you're trying to grow your channel. It is so exciting to be like, oh, every 50 people, every 100 people, and like you get up there and you're like, oh, but like my Instagram numbers, not to say that are not as important to me. I still pay attention to them. I still am validated by that number, but like I'm not creating trackers for it anymore because the last time I created a tracker, my I didn't fill that tracker out for 4 months because the number didn't move in 4 months. And I was like, what is going on? It would just go up and down, and just stay there. I was just like, am I not doing better? I'm not doing worse, but like and I was just like, well, this is kind of pointless now. And so I also outgrew, I think, a bit of that, kind of matured out of it as well, we can say, is that I was so much more focused now just on the general community. If you like what I'm doing, fantastic. Let's appreciate and love what we're doing. But I don't have to track how well I'm doing for that type of validation like I used to back in the day. Now it's just so much more about the actual community and the people who want to celebrate that with you. And then the new people that randomly find you and the algorithm wants to shoot it out to a few other people, and suddenly you have more new people that are coming in. I still love to see the little blue new follower thing. Like that still gets me excited, but not because the number is increasing now like it used to. It's because now I have even more people that I can talk to and share about stationery and fountain pens and notebooks and things like that. So I have matured as an individual. So I don't feel the need to track that anymore because I'm just happy with where it is.
Yeah. Whereas my tracking of that has just gone digital because then it'll do the math for me, like avoiding pain points rather than me having to like whip out a calculator or, let's be honest, my phone and do all of the math for that. Boo hiss. But I liked your point there about the like seeing a number not changing and that being demotivating. that could definitely be a reason why you're avoiding part of your planner or your planning system. Maybe it's something to do with like a goal or a project or whatever. And because you haven't been making progress or not been making progress as fast as you would like or as much as you'd like or whatnot, there can just be a way to safeguard yourself against that. It's like, oh, well, out of sight, out of mind. If I don't go back and look at that page, or I don't go and fill in that tracker, or I don't go and check things off that list because there's not all that much to report, then I can kind of like lie to myself almost and keep the good feelings good as opposed to being confronted with the reality that I'm not doing the things that I said I wanted to do for myself.
Yeah, that's why I don't step on a scale anymore.
It's just a negative thing. Like, let's just not do it. It's easy. I do think though, one of the things that I will do when it comes to trying to solve a problem that I have, or like, this idea of possibly outgrowing part of the system or whatnot, is ooch a solution rather than, throw the planner away and like start afresh. It's so hard not to just throw the planner away and start afresh because I love setting up systems and I get really excited about the newness of it and all of those kind of things. But if there's any kind of way where you can do a test run or a trial run, or what we call an ooch, then that's usually a really nice way to keep the kind of like familiarity of a system that you already had and test run things that could be solutions. So rather than, taking your planner that's not working and just being like, cool, guess I'll biff it. I'm going to go to a ring bound Hobonichi. I don't think that's a thing, but I'm going to do it now. Like, it could happen, rather than going completely new and like, full 180ing or something like that. Stick with elements that are still good, stick with the parts that are still working, and just bring in a little bit of newness, a little bit of novelty, something that's going to help you solve the problem. Like newness for the sake of newness, I'd say it's pointless. It's not. There's like an excitement that goes with that as well. But if we're actively trying to solve a problem here, like what could we do that's a trial run of a solution without fully committing to something new? So if I'm thinking about, for instance, my 5 year journal that I'm currently using, I have gotten to a point where my routine surrounding that is really poor. It used to live beside my bed. My journal would be there at the end of every day. I would check in with it at the end of every day, write my 3 lines, go to sleep. It was good. And then, for some reason, I think it was because I was making a video, I bought the planner or journal out of my room and into my office. But at the end of the day, I'm not in my office. At the very, very end of the day, I'm in my bedroom. So I'd be there in bed, like, oh, yeah, gonna write my stuff. Oh, it's not here. I guess I'm not. I ain't getting out of bed. I got into bed. I'm cozy now. Absolutely not. And just go to sleep. Many moons later, my current 5 year journal has many holes that I need to go backfill. And I've built it up in my mind that I have to do it all at once, even though conscious Jess knows that that is not true. She knows that that is a fallacy. That is not accurate. But subconscious Jess doesn't care. She's like, no, you have to do it all at once. And it's going to be a really big task. And we're just going to avoid the pain of that. So we're just going to put it off. But that means that because I have like broken the habit that I had with filling it in, I'm finding it difficult to fill in. And because I have also built up this idea of having to fill everything in that's not filled in all at once, and this is just like really big friction to starting, it means that that planner isn't really working for me. But I would not go as far to say that I have outgrown it because I do think that it still is beneficial. I still enjoy it when I use it. I still feel satisfied when I get to go through and see all of the entries I previously had. But part of me is like, well, hey, that one's not working. Just start a new one. She's not going to. All right. She's committed. This is her 4th year on this 5 year planner or like 5 year journal or whatnot. And that feels like an awful amount of effort to waste. But and even though I keep telling myself, like, no, Jessica, you do not need to start a new 5 year journal. You just need to reestablish the habit. And I know what the solution is. And I have started to implement things towards the solution. I have given myself a pass on saying, like, okay, you don't have to go and fill in the back entries. I will at some stage. I'm just not doing it right now because that feels scary and too hard. But just pick up where you like are right now. Get in and start filling in the entries from where you are the current day right now. So I'm happy to report it's back beside my bed. I have been filling it in for the past 3 days. Hopefully, this is the start of me rebuilding my habit. But that doesn't mean that I'm not constantly wondering, hey, should I just like start a 5 year Hobonichi channel? I'm pretty sure Hobonichi is not the brand for me. I'm pretty sure the paper is not my kind of vibe, but that's still a thought that I keep having.
Well, you make a good point though about that when you're even talking about just like Hobonichi as a whole. I think sometimes too when we get into certain things like a Hobonichi or into like a certain method like the bullet journal, or I think about other brands, right, that have kind of built out from these Happy Planner, for instance, and some of these other ones. I know for myself personally, and I want to, I'm not skirting around this topic because I still like kind of support it, but like I'll just be very like transparent and honest that like I also personally feel a little bit like I've fallen kind of out of love of like with bullet journaling, but because of like the brand associated with bullet journaling, and not necessarily, well, I guess it could be Ryder Carroll if we're going to talk about like the originator of the bullet journal method, right? But like if I think back to when I first started, there was so much excitement and hype around bullet journaling, right? We're all learning it around the same time. It was really catching its stride. More people were doing it. It was great. Right. And we all got into it. And we all hashtagged it. And we all talked about it. And I mean, we've created brands and personalities and celebrities right from it, right? Have developed out of that. But like what really started to kind of rub me the wrong way was like, I don't remember the years that it was, but where Ryder and like the bullet journal brand started to kind of turn their nose up to what essentially is creative bullet journaling or creative planning. You know, all of these people that have built all this hype around it and using materials and pens and doing all of this, suddenly they were like, oh no, that's not bullet journaling. And that rubbed me the wrong way personally, right? Like I really didn't love that. And I wanted to still be like, no, like there's good here because the method itself for me has been life changing, period, right? I can say that no problem. But I also felt like, while I'm representing or I'm a part of this brand because I'm utilizing the notebooks or I'm talking about the people or the method and kind of giving light to that. And I wouldn't say like Bullet Journal or Ryder Carroll has done anything like bad to me, right? Like I've been a part of their affiliate program, like I've done that before, I've made content for them, all of that's good and done. But like it's just been such a roller coaster over the years. I personally feel like of like, oh, we love everybody and it's great. We want people to talk about it. But then when it's no longer right for you, or you've written a new book, or you've put out a new paid subscription to videos to learn about it, whatever, and you're promoting that, suddenly we're not about that anymore. And then like the media period's over for that, and suddenly we're reaching out, we want more creative journaling and people to make our notebooks and do all of these things. And it just, I just haven't loved that for a brand. And I know like Happy Planner had its moment, I think, with like the CEO and some other things. I think it might have been that brand in the past with some things that have happened in the past. I think it was like around COVID or something like that, maybe, or some people celebrating something. I forget what it was, or maybe I'm mixing it up. But like there was something that happened with that brand specifically, right? Then people were like, "Oh, I don't want to support them anymore because of these types of things." Or I know with like Hobonichi's and some others, like the paper has changed, and people really didn't love that, right? For whatever reason that might be. And so I think there's also like a little bit of that has happened too, where like, well, maybe I just don't identify with this brand or this method or these people anymore because of just where I am in my life as well. I don't want to like belabor the point there. Hopefully I'm kind of still making that point and kind of saying that it's just like I just don't like some things that are happening there. Therefore, like I don't want to talk about it as much. I'd rather be with people who are going to celebrate the things that we love than like side with the people who are going to hate on others for doing things the way that they're finding the most success.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely something to be said about what I would consider like personal branding, because everybody has a personal brand. If you're not sure what a personal brand technically is, it's essentially like an intentional association between yourself and other things. So, like, part of my personal brand, I guess, if we're gonna dive into it, is Jess loves Coke Zero. Jess enjoys short walks to the fridge for Coke Zero, kind of a thing. Jess is a user of Archer and Olive. Like, that's an association. It's like a kind of repeated tie of yourself to something. It could be like as a physical thing, like the Coke Zero and the Archer and Olive journals, or it could be to like a concept or an idea. And I feel like, even if not consciously, if your use of a planner or a planning system or whatnot, and the consistency in using that, if that kind of starts to go against your personal brand in a way, like maybe some values that you hold, or ways that you see yourself, or the ways that you see planning, or something like that, maybe if a company doesn't represent that as much as it used to, or maybe if it has some kind of like behavior that works against that, then I can understand that it would start to leave kind of a sour taste in your mouth using that. If we think about the bullet journal example specifically, and this idea of being very much community focused at certain points during the brand's lifetime, and then at other points being not so community focused, as somebody who does have community as part of their personal brand, it would be interesting for me to kind of like fully align myself with Bullet Journal, given the fact that Bullet Journal has had a track record of either being in or out in terms of that community aspect. If we think about it in terms of, say, Erin Condren, there were periods throughout the lifetime of the brand where certain people in that brand had made it known that they had certain values or didn't have certain values that were probably shared by their customer base. So people in their customer base were probably feeling not only just like a little bit betrayed by the things that came to light or whatnot, but also would start to question, like, okay, well, then do I want to use an Erin Condren if Erin Condren as a brand is tied to XYZ when I don't believe in XYZ? I feel like for a lot of people, it's not a really super conscious decision, but that is definitely something that I think that you and I, as being people who make content for the internet and personal branding becomes a kind of like central part of that, those are considerations that we may have, whereas other people might not actively have them.
Yeah, or I mean, or you just do. I mean, you use a brand for a while, something happens that you don't identify with, and you don't use that brand. There's other options out there. I mean, it would be devastating if anything ever happened with Archer and Olive, where like suddenly like they went like this other direction, and like here you and I are always like talking about it and making videos and loving it and being a part of all of those things. Like that would, oh, that would be horrible. Like, because I love them as a brand, right? I know the people. We are part of that community in doing that. You feel accepted into it, whether you're on the affiliate team or you're not. Like it still feels very good around the things that are happening. But I think individuals can make those choices too. Some people don't like the products or the materials people use or where they get it from, and then they can make decisions on whether or not they do that too. Just to bring it back around though, but like that can absolutely completely disrupt how you do things. If you, and Aaron Condren is the one I was thinking. I don't know if Happy Planner and those are the same or different.
They have their own problems. Every planner brand has their problems.
I'm so sorry if like there is no drama with Happy Planner, and Aaron Condren is the one I think I am thinking of with that. But like, imagine using a system like that for years, and suddenly, like you said, I don't identify with that brand or those people anymore, and then you have to go find another way to do the things that you've been doing forever with that resource. Like that would be devastating to some people in doing that. I feel like with bullet journaling and using the method specifically, like it's been helpful for me. I have no problem in talking with it to other people if they're interested in like discovering something. But I am no longer, because of my own personal maturity, out there running the streets with the bullet journal Bible, like here is the word of writer Carol, and if you dare pick up a crayon or colored pencil, I will smash thee with this book. Like, no, that's not what it's about, right? Like, it's so much more about finding something that works well for you. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, let's use pens and inks and other materials that make me happy while I'm using that too. Let me love the writing and the analog way that I'm doing because of this now, more than the hardcore rules of where that is. And I think that's where it starts to splinter a bit. And I think that's where I said, like, you can absolutely outgrow something just based off of like we're talking. I mean, we've been talking about like our own personal issues and why we've moved away, but there are like these broader things that could also definitely push you away from a brand, and you have to move on. Something might have to happen.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it so much as we were going through the majority of this episode, but I guess in a way, I would say that I did outgrow bullet journaling. And I think that the main part of it for me was the idea that for the reason that I really got into bullet journaling to start with was the flexibility. And I really loved the fact that you could really make it your own. You could make your own collections. You could design layouts in such a way that would fit your life. That's kind of the main draw card was that aspect of it. But then I feel like, and I don't think that this was maybe necessarily their intention, or maybe it was just the way that I kind of interpreted it or whatnot. It got to a point where bullet journaling was more about adhering to XYZ in order to be considered a bullet journal. And I felt like I wasn't represented in that because I wasn't doing specifically those things. But I do also feel like there was a level of kind of like planner maturity, as you're calling it, or what I'm just going to call like, I don't know, self awareness when it came to my planning, that it was okay that bullet journaling required those things. It just meant that I wasn't bullet journaling anymore. and maybe I had like graduated or something. I had moved beyond that system to form a system of my own.
You ascended, planner ascension.
Ah, that's right. Thank you. Crown it, halo, whatever. But way too spiritual. Um, but I do think that, going through that journey of figuring out the system itself, like bullet journaling as a system and method or whatever, and how it actually did or didn't work for me, and making those tweaks and changes or whatnot to get to a point where my system does look quite different to theirs, and then being able to let go of the terminology that I had kind of tied to my system. Because at the end of the day, if you're kind of making a comparison between what is written in the textbook of the bullet journal method or whatnot versus what I'm actually doing in my planners, yeah, there is minimal overlap. Maybe some key terms that are being used in a similar way for slightly similar things or whatnot. But I do also feel like for a lot of people, that step away, or moving out of a system, or if you feel like you've outgrown a system, there can be this kind of like of fear of letting go, fear of messing up. Like, what if I make a change and then that doesn't work? And, if I had just stuck it out, maybe this was just a rut. Maybe it was just for a small amount of time or something. You can kind of hold yourself back from finding a system that is going to work better for you in the here and now, in the current stage of life you're in, for your current situation, if you're kind of just holding on to what used to work. So, if you are, currently going through this period of thinking like maybe I've outgrown my system or my plan or at least part of it, just know that like this is not a closed door kind of situation. It's not like you're going to walk through the door, make some changes, and you can never come back. All right. We need to make sure that we're treating this like a revolving door kind of choice. It's not going to be like oh, yep, I have permanently decided that this is not for me and I'm going to yeet it out of my life and go and find something completely new, never to return again. And that's why doing an ooch is good, right? It takes some of the fear out of it, some of this kind of, uncertainty with trying a new system or trying something slightly different or whatever, in knowing that, like, hey, this doesn't have to be permanent. This is reversible. I could just go back to what I was doing if it really, really, appeals to me again.
No, I think I love the idea of the ooch. Every time you say that, I think of ouch though, and I'm like, oh, ouch, that hurts. But I know what an ooch is because I looked it up after the first time you said it because I was like, an ooch, that sounds terrible. But I think that what's also really great about that is the idea of experimentation, though. Like if you allow yourself that freedom to say, I don't identify, or maybe I am outgrowing this. It's almost like, well, let me try it for a little bit. It's like dating. You're dating a new planner system or a new book or something like that, right? And then you're like this idea of like, okay, like we're gonna go out a few times, we're gonna try it out, we're gonna see if we're vibing. Like, does this seem like it's going to work? And after 3 months or so, I'll make the decision on whether or not I want to continue on with this or if I want to date something else, right? And like I don't know why I'm connecting it to that, but it's just this idea that like the very first time you do it, you don't have to get married to it. Right. So, like, try it out, see how it goes. I think about a lot of the other YouTubers, at least that are popping up for me now, and it has very much moved away from just bullet journal, bullet journal, bullet journal. Right now, it's moved on to here's something that I'm using right now that works for me. Here's how I'm time tracking. Here's how I'm paying attention to this. I've been, we talked about it a while ago, but like your content itself has evolved from where it used to be even to where it is now, but it's also because like your life has also changed, right? Like your content changes as you go through this. And I think that's also something that like is hard because also if you're a person who has been doing a certain type of content for a while and suddenly you're not, like there's a lot of people that we can look back on now that aren't, they're still around, but they're not talking about bullet journals anymore. Now they're talking about books, right? Or they're into lifestyle or they're into something else, but like it doesn't mean that they aren't still jotting down ideas or whatever. They just found like a different way that maybe they're organizing themselves or figured it out. And so like the moral of this rant story whatever is just like it's okay to try it out, do a little exploration, see what's up, try it Jess's way, try it Mark's way, try it someone else's way, and if there is no way, that's okay. Like create your own, Frankenstein this thing. Like put together all the things you've loved from the past into something new. Spend some time with it and then see how well it works for you and change it when it doesn't.
No, very much that. And I think that coming at it with this lens of kind of like curiosity and exploration and experimentation can just make what feels very painful almost a little bit exciting in a way. I think that the nice part about outgrowing your planner is that there is that potential for newness and the potential for finding like the new system that works really well for you, even if it's only for a few weeks because you've got ADHD and nothing ever sticks and all of that kind of stuff. But Planner Pals, we would absolutely love to hear from you. Have you ever outgrown your planner? Are you currently outgrowing your planner? What kind of things did you use to identify that you might be outgrowing it? And what are you planning on doing about it now? Either let us know in the comments over on YouTube or Spotify, or you can hit us up at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com or over on Instagram at plannerpalspodcast.
Yeah, and totally therapize me in the comments too. Like if y'all like Mark, here is your problem. No, I always say that I love the comment section because I will read through them like a book, and I'm jotting down in a separate notebook like all these different ideas on things to do and try. It is absolutely amazing. So Planner Pals, just thank you in advance for all of your knowledge and sharing, because not only does it help us, but it also helps out the rest of this community. Like you're not alone, and that also makes us feel very special when we know that like we're not the only ones that are going through this, and maybe some people have found what the other side of this hill looks like, and so those are the things we'd love to hear about. So can't wait to read those. And always, Planner Pals, thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.